$40 billion, 2 gigawatts, 5,000 construction jobs. That's the Northern Territory's next AI data center announced outside Darwin. And 2 gigawatts is a number worth sitting with. It's more than 6 times the maximum demand of Darwin and Katherine combined in 2025. That's the ABC's figure. And the other day, it got a bit more real too. Beetaloo signed an MOU with Halliburton, an actual oil and gas services company, to look at developing the site. That moved the proposal forward slightly, because I read the whole ASX release, and I can tell you exactly what exists out there today. An agreement over 185 hectares of empty land, while a gas company works out whether any of this stacks up. No data center operator named, no power plant developer, no pipeline developer, no hyperscaler, no anchor customer, no committed finance, major approvals still to come. So this isn't a $40 billion project under construction. It's the first rung on the ladder to one. Pull up a seat, regulars, because this could turn into one of the biggest infrastructure projects this country's ever built. It could also be a very effective way of creating an enormous new customer for Beetaloo Gas. The documents tell you which one it is right now and what would have to happen for it to become the other. Now, Weddell's about 30 kilometers southeast of Darwin. The Northern Territory has given Beetaloo Energy an exclusive opportunity over 185 hectares of it. They call it a not-to-deal arrangement. The AFR reports it runs for 12 months. Now, that's not nothing. If you control a site, you can run your own studies, plan your infrastructure, and go talk to partners without worrying about the land vanishing underneath you halfway through. But it's not a construction approval. It's not a land sale, and it's nowhere near a final investment decision. The government's own release says the arrangement gives the company time to develop its plans and look at feasibility. Beetaloo's ASX disclosure says the whole thing depends on concept studies, finding consortium partners, and on government and regulatory approvals. And the managing director told the ABC it's day one, that it'll need serious finance and serious approvals. Worth holding on to that, because all the enormous numbers live at the far end of this ladder. 40 billion is what the project could attract if it's fully developed. 5,000 construction jobs, 350 ongoing. Those are the forecasts for the version where everything goes right. In the public material, nobody's committed that money. Nobody's hired anyone. So what has to happen between an empty paddock and 2 gigawatts of compute? Nearly everything. There are 4 big moving parts here, and they all have to work. Beetaloo supplies the gas from a resource about 500 kilometers southeast of Darwin. Someone's got to build the pipeline to move a very large amount of it north. Someone's got to build and run up to 2 gigawatts of gas-fired generation at Weddell. And then someone's got to build the actual data center campuses and find customers who need that much compute. 4 parts. And on the investor slide, 3 of those boxes say more or less the same thing. Discussions underway. The Halliburton MOU puts a real name against part of that chain, which is genuinely more than the company had last week, but it's non-binding. And the company says it's still in discussions with others on the pipeline, on power, and on the data center itself. Still no hyperscaler, no cloud company, no model lab, no anchor customer. What the company says is that Beetaloo Digital will go looking for a world-class consortium, and the commercial talks about a joint venture are progressing. That's honest, early-stage language. It really is. It also means the headline, $40 billion data center, is describing what a consortium might build, and that the consortium hasn't been publicly put together. Even the pictures come with a warning label. Those glossy buildings in the deck are illustrations, not an approved design. And the company says it's moving into pre-FEED, front-end engineering design. Pre-FEED is where you test whether the basic concepts work, compare your options, and get the cost clear enough to decide if detailed engineering is worth paying for, which is a lot closer to working out the recipe than it is to pouring the concrete. So here's what I kept coming back to. Why does an ASX-listed gas producer announce an AI data center before it's announced anyone to build the AI data center? Because the data center is also meant to be the gas customer. To be fair to Beetaloo, they're not hiding this. They spell it out. AI data centers run around the clock. They need enormous amounts of power, and they need it predictably. Predictable power means predictable demand for gas. And that demand is what helps justify developing the gas field, building the pipeline, and building the power station. The company reckons each 1 gigawatt campus could need up to 200 terajoules of gas a day just for generation. Run that out over 2 full gigawatts, and the data center isn't a side project bolted onto a gas company. Is the customer big enough to make the gas project happen? Which is why the order of this announcement feels backwards. If you assume the product being sold is cloud computing, it makes a lot more sense if the first product is a reliable, round-the-clock buyer for Beetaloo gas. And that's not a trick. Big integrated projects get designed this way all the time. One piece exists to make another piece feasible. Plants need gas fields, data centers need power. The risk is everything ends up depending on everything else. The pipeline needs the power plant needs the data center load, the data center needs the customer, and that customer is going to want proof the power, the cooling, the fiber, and the approvals all turn up on schedule. Until someone closes that circle, the scale that makes this exciting is the same thing that's going to make it hard. Now, there's a real case here for Darwin. I want to give it properly. It's closer to a lot of Asian markets than Sydney or Melbourne. Subsea cables land there, Weddell's a big greenfield site, and the Northern Territory government has been openly pitching the region as a digital infrastructure hub for a while now. There's also this. The Darwin-Katherine electricity system is isolated from the national electricity market. You can't just order 2 gigawatts down a transmission line from Queensland. So the project's answer is to build its own. Beetaloo says it would deliberately overbuild the power station so it's not pulling electricity off the local grid, and then it would push surplus back into it. If that actually works, engineering and commercially, the project adds power to the Northern Territory instead of competing with households for the power that's already there. That's the strongest version of this, genuinely. It's also still a company claim at concept stage. No grid agreement made public, no final plant design, no water allocation identified in the announcement, and the managing director told the ABC he couldn't say yet how water would be managed. And close to Asia isn't the same thing as customers signed. Somebody still has to pick Darwin over every other site pitching its own power, fiber, workforce, equipment supply, and fast approvals. Darwin's advantages have to be worth the cost and the risk of building an entire energy and compute chain from bare ground. And then there's Canberra. 1 week before Weddell was announced, the Prime Minister said the next generation of large data centres will be legally obliged to underwrite new power supply and pay for the full grid connection cost. In the speech the industry minister quoted the next day, he went further. They'd have to put at least as much energy into the grid as they take out. The point of that is all straightforward. Households shouldn't end up carrying the cost. And Beetaloo says its proposals line up with exactly that, because it plans to generate its own power and feed the surplus into the territory system. On those two tests, the words match. The problem is what's making the electricity. Federal expectations so far talk about new and additional clean generation or storage. Industry Minister Tim Aries told the ABC new supply would be renewables, backed by batteries and gas. And when he was asked about a different gas-fired data centre proposal at Moss Vale, he said it didn't look consistent with the principles. Weddell isn't Moss Vale, and the law isn't written yet. The standards go to the National Cabinet in August, with legislation expected early next year. So it's too early to tell you this design passes, fails, or gets an exemption. What we've got is a disagreement sitting inside the same promise. Canberra's saying data centres should bring new power so you don't pay for it, with renewables doing most of the work. The Territory is saying you can protect consumers by building new gas generation in a system where local gas and round-the-clock power are the whole competitive advantage. Both of them say they're keeping your bill down. The final standards decide whether both are allowed to. And the decision could determine whether the project's basic energy design survives at all. It's easy to have a laugh at a giant announcement on day one. It's also worth taking the good version seriously. The forecast is up to 5,000 construction jobs and 350 long-term operating jobs. And the company says the focus would be Darwin and Palmerston workforce, not fly in, fly out. 350 permanent jobs isn't 5,000, but it isn't zero either. And construction, pipeline, power and maintenance work builds real capability around a site. If that power station genuinely adds a reliable supply to the local system, that's a public benefit beyond the data centre. A big customer for Territory Gas could unlock infrastructure other industries end up using too. Notice how many times I said if and could. The public bargain here depends on details that don't exist yet. Who pays for the shared infrastructure? How much power actually reaches the grid? What happens with water and with emissions? What has the community agreed to? And how many of these local jobs are still there once construction finishes? And what if the gas infrastructure gets built while the data center ambition quietly shrinks? Neither slogan answers any of that. Every promised benefit needs to become a condition somebody can measure before the headline turns into actual public leverage. So, is Australia getting a $40 billion AI data center? Not yet. There's a real proponent, a real parcel of land under temporary exclusivity, a real commercial idea, and now a named partner on a non binding agreement. Here's what I'll be watching for: name consortium partners, and specifically a hyperscaler, an operator, and an anchor customer, because those are the pieces everything else waits on. Then the engineering, completed concept and front end designs with a cost range you can believe. Pipeline and generation agreements signed, then the hard part: a water plan, an environmental assessment, and community consultation based on an actual design. Approvals that deal with whatever the final federal power standards turn out to be. And last, committed finance and a final investment decision. Until those land, the honest description is a proposed gas and power data center precinct, not a $40 billion project under construction. The number might turn out to be right, the thing might get built. Announcing early is one of the ways you find partners you need to build it. But the announcement tells you what exists. On the page with the future data center, the image says illustrative. On the page with the consortium, the critical roles say discussions underway. And on the page with the site, there's land. That's not a failure, it's a starting line. The mistake would be filming the finish before anyone's run the race. If you want to see how many of these are actually being proposed across the country and how many exist, go watch the last video I did. I mapped out everything that's publicly available. And I also built a website that has a map showing all the data centers in Australia under construction and proposed. So go ahead, go see that. If you like this content, hit and subscribe, and I will see you another time.